Hey, Don,
Hey, Kim.
we're live.
Hey, we're live. There we are. Had to tell me to wake up, huh? I was making notes over here. All right.
Grandpa, quit taking a nap.
Welcome to the deal, Dr. Livestream. It's Monday, 1 o'clock, and yes, I'm awake now. Thank you. Anyway, today I have Kim Anderson joining us. She is our broker down Kalamazoo, part of the broker support team, and in charge of our education here at 5 Stars. So I think we're going to have a lot to offer to you today, talking about possession and what can we do as agents to give advice to our clients, our buyers in particular, about what they can expect when the keys get turned over, whether it's at closing, that's the easy one, or when we have the seller retains possession for a period of time, no matter how long that period of time might be. So let's talk about the easy one first, shall we, Kim?
Sure. Yep.
You got to get possession at closing. You say to your buyers, you're going to get the keys right after the closing, gets all the closing docs signed, and you're going to get the keys and you go in and you get the house. A couple of things that happen. Let's pretend, not that this has ever happened within the last year, but the buyer doesn't get the keys because their loan isn't funded until the next day. Now what happens? Or even it's not funded on Friday afternoon at 5:30, and the closing has taken place, but the loan hasn't funded. So what's the rule at that point? Do the keys transfer at Friday at 7 o'clock at night, or does the buyer have to wait until Monday? What's your take, Kim?
In my opinion, they don't get keys till it's funded. That's what I do to be safe.
Yeah.
Once it's funded, then everybody's been paid, and then I'll meet with the other agent, and depending who I'm representing, but I would say at funding, not.
And I would agree totally with you. There are some people, and they are called attorneys, which believe otherwise, and then there are the other side of the attorneys who believe otherwise, and so the two of them usually start arguing, and it gets ugly. So if we can manage our clients' expectations, our buyers' expectations about what happens when they get the keys, when do they actually get the keys, when is the loan funded, and so on. So let's pretend it's Friday afternoon, 4:30, the loan is funded, and the keys, the seller hands over the keys to the buyer, and the buyer goes out to the property, and guess what? There's enough junk left in the property to fill a 30-yard dumpster. What now?
My first question would be, did you do a final walkthrough? That'd be my first question. And when did you do it? If you went 48 hours ago, wasn't there a heads up, right? It has to be some sign that, hey, what's going on with what's left in the home? That's where I would start, Don.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree. Yes, so our walkthroughs, standard clauses in all of the contracts we use, or is it something that we actually have to include? And then we'll talk a little bit about consequences. What's your take? We got about what, 14, 16 different sets of forms that we use. So
yeah. So some of them, even West Michigan Regional now just gave you the option. It used to be that the agents had to copy the clause in. In GCAR, it's a part of it. So for us in GCAR, it's standard. It's no red flag when you're in multiple offers. But in West Michigan Regional, which a majority of our agents are in, if you write it in, I found some agents lost because of that. But we can tweak the language, right? We can tweak the language that doesn't say they can terminate. So there are different boards out there, but personally, I would never advise my clients to buy a home that they saw 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. This is my own personal preference, without seeing it and signing for $350,000. What do you think?
Well, I totally agree. And I think that one of the things that I've talked about a lot about in our Con Ed and our educational programs is consequences. Some of those clauses in various contracts that we use do not indicate what the consequence is. I walk in there 9 o'clock in the morning of the closing, and I see junk everywhere. What happens? What is my right as a buyer? Do I have the right to walk away? Well, actually, although it's implied in that action, it's not necessarily expressed in the actual purchase agreement. The consequences are really important in this particular case, that if the buyer finds debris and condition that is unacceptable, they have the right to not close and get their earnest
Right.
deposit back. So we have to protect our buyers. We also take the risk that a seller may see that and go, wait a minute, I'm not going to take that risk. They're not going to like something, you know, the color of the wallpaper on the morning of the closing, and they're going to bail out. Well, what's the likelihood of that happening, do you think, Kim?
Well, most likely not, right? Most likely they're not gonna, you've kicked the can that far down the road. So most likely not. And my personal preference is, I want to work this out, write an addendum, call the deal doctors if you have to, but get it fixed. Once you sign on that dotted line, all your leverage is gone, right?
Absolutely. And yes, by all means, call Deal Doctor Broker Support. We'll help you walk through that process. So that's kind of the easy one, you know, get the keys at closing, possession at closing. Now, let's talk about the tough one, and that is possession, let's say 30 days after closing. Now what happens? The first thing that I identify is that there's not a specific date. You actually have to stop for a moment, ask yourself who gets the day of closing, and when are those keys going to be transferred over? I try to work all of that out prior to the actual closing and have everyone sign an addendum that the keys are going to change hands on, let's say, August 31st at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then there's no question, there's no ambiguity about it. It's clear, it's, you know, everybody knows exactly when the keys are going to change hands. So, Kim, what can happen between now and August 31st, let's say at 5 p.m.? What are some of the fun things we run into?
Lots of things. So let me go back to that question or the last statement. I like to write into my purchase agreements that even though the buyer will have, or the seller will have possession, say for 7 days, I like my buyers to have a key to their home. I do. When they purchase it, I want to have a key to their home. So I do write into my purchase agreements that we receive a set of keys to the home at the closing table. That's just my personal preference. We get that question a lot. And I think what you said, write it in. Is it August 5th at 4:30? Is it at closing? But I think we need to be really clear, because I think we see that question a lot, right? And then secondly, back to your war stories, we have lots of things that can happen in 2 days, 3 days, 7 days, 30 days. So let's do the shorter one to start with, because once we get, I mean, we're going to get into, should we have a contract, clauses, all those kind of things. But whenever I have a buyer that's allowing the seller to stay there 7 days to move out, I like to write in specific language. And some of the things that I have seen is, even though in one particular case, this seller was particular, everything was perfect, the house was immaculate. We did do a walkthrough. I hear some agents go, well, why will I do a walkthrough? They're going to keep it for 30 days. Because I want to know the condition of that home, at least the day before we close on it. I do a walkthrough. I protect my buyers. I want to be able to look at my buyers in the grocery store when I see them along the way, and they say, hey, Kim, this is the best transaction I ever had. I don't want to hide from them. So in my particular case, house seemed immaculate. When we got the possession 7 days later, this immaculate person decided that they were going to take the garage electrical panel system, everything.
Wow.
But so what had happened was he had a grow room up there, which we guessed, but everything was removed, right? But you could see the lights, and so he said that's personal property, and he decided to take his grow system with him, which was totally fine. But when he did it, he cut all the power to the garage. So when we took possession, there was no power in the garage at all. The other thing he did was he took his shelves off the wall, which always clarify shelves. He took those big holes. He took the TV mounts, which we know should stay. So this really perfect home we came in, there's nothing worse than a buyer being so excited about their brand new home and walking into issues, right? So that's what he did. And we had to figure that out after the fact, right?
How did you figure it out after the fact? How did it turn out?
So what I did was, first thing was I called the listing agent. Hey, we got a little problem here. Can you help me? What's going on here? And here's the story, was when we were at the closing table, my buyer right prior said, hey, I'm not really comfortable letting them have possession for a week. Can we write something in? So we did. We wrote an addendum, and we held $500 in escrow. Star Title held it, and we wrote that into the contract. And I'm so glad we did, because honestly, I wasn't doing it. And sometimes we learn our best lessons from when we make a mistake, right? And this seemed perfect. It just seemed perfect, wasn't a problem. So we had $500 in escrow, which gave us some leverage. I called the agent. We went back and forth, back and forth. As I stated before, it's so hard to have leverage once a deal is closed. This guy was working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, didn't care, didn't want to talk to us, didn't want to fix anything. So it was rather stressful. So I had to put together how much every mount cost, how much it was going to be to repair the walls, what the electrical system was going to be. It's a lot of work afterwards, but at least I had $500 to work with. It ended up, I had to chase another $250, which I can't remember if the listing agent paid or the seller paid. We did get everybody happy, but it took us a little bit. So I'm really grateful I had 500. If I had to pay $250, that would be better than me paying $750 to make my buyer happy, right?
Absolutely. And we've run into this question a lot about what is in a fixture and what is personal property. And as we know from our license training and in the purchase agreements, and a fixture is anything that is basically nailed in, screwed down, glued on, anything that is there permanently attached. That is in a fixture, and it's supposed to stay with the property. However, we have also had situations, in my own real quick war story I've told before, about my nephew who bought a property and the hot tub was bolted down on a pad that was specifically poured for that particular house. Excuse me, it was hard plumbed, hardwired. There was no question in my mind that that was a fixture. Well, when they pulled in a crane and took it away, you can imagine my shock as well as my buyers. And that was about a $3,000 lesson. Thank you very much. Because when we went to the attorney and said, hey, what do we do about this? The attorney said, well, it depends on what the intent of the seller was. And because the intent of both parties was never expressly stated in the purchase agreement, he said it could go either way. It's a coin toss. All righty. So again, clarify, make it clear what you expect to be there, even if there's some question about, isn't it a fixture? Well, it sure looks like a fixture, but as you say, if it's an electrical system or it's fixtures that are buried up into cans that are buried up into the ceiling, make it clear, make it, spell it out. TV mounts, all of those kinds of things that are attached could go away if you don't spell them out. I want to move on just a second. And let's go back to that, turning the keys over and the buyer gets the keys. And then they decide to say, well, we want to deliver some new hardwood floors and put them in the put it in the garage because we're going to be moving in here in 2-3 weeks. So we want to go in and put it in the garage. And oh, by the way, we want to put the gym set, the jungle gym, out in the backyard. Can we go and do that? And what's the answer?
No, as Eric would say, no, no, and no.
No, no, and no. Yes, that's correct. And and why? Because
liability.
Yeah, well, and the seller has the right during the possession period to live at their will. to not be having an intrusion by the new buyer, even if they have the keys. They have to, the buyer has to, can only access the property for issues that are health or safety related. And unless it's an emergency, they have to give adequate notice, which is generally considered the night before. So again, these are all things that we need to make our buyers aware of, and help manage their expectations when we get into questions of possession. So,
Hey, Don, do you remember one of our questions a year or so ago where the buyer had a dumpster delivered prior to having possession? Do you remember that?
I think I may have been left out of that conversation, thankfully, but
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that happen, and our agent specifically asked the listing agent, and they said, no, you cannot deliver that. And then it was delivered. We getting these situations, and you know, a lot of times they are attorney questions. They are things that only the courts can settle. And as we all know, that's very expensive to do. It's a long time. It takes a lot of time. It's just best don't do these things. I believe I advised our buying agent, call and have it removed, pay for it yourself. I mean, that's what's going to happen here, right?
yeah,
So a lot of things go on prior to closing that, you know, what if there was a fire and your $3,000 worth of wood floors are in the seller's garage, who is now a tenant, right? Who's paying for that? What's going to happen if the seller loads them on their truck and drives off with them? So those are the things we have to think about.
so let's say that we're going to close on Friday, and
Okay.
the keys are going to be transferred a month from Friday.
Okay.
What should we advise our clients, our buyers? What should we do in that kind of a situation, or put in an offer, or in the course of negotiations over the period of time of closing? What should we advise our buyers to do to protect them in that situation?
So I always, even if I'm in multiple offers, I still do this when we're giving them 30 days free. There are different addendums, and we're going to post these after the live stream. Eric has written up some good information for us. There's some addendums out there. But basically, you could A, have a rental agreement, and or B, there is an addendum that you should be attaching to your contract that states the terms of that, who's paying for what, who's liable for what, like you said, when can the buyer enter? And so I always either attach addendum or write this information into the purchase agreement. And in that, it's going to tell the consequences that Don loves to talk about, right?
Yes, and thank you. Yes, it's amazing how that really helps, because when you go and sit down with your attorney, if you have to do that, then the attorney is going to say, well, this is pretty clear. Unfortunately, we get all too often in situations where the attorney will look at it and go, yeah, so what? So there's a walkthrough, so what? You know, what does that mean? I love the rental agreement, and that is a document that you're going to post up here after we're done.
Yeah.
Anything else that you can think of, Kim, to share with our agents out there about, you know, protecting buyers or managing their expectations when the keys get turned over? I mentioned the thing that I had yesterday with my own client who got the keys at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and immediately called me and said, well, where's the window covering? Where are the window coverings? And I said, what window coverings? Well, the curtains and drapes. And I had failed to explain to him that they might not have curtains and drapes there, that if they were mini blinds, that they were, you know, they should have stayed, but not curtains and drapes, which are personal property. And he goes, oh, I wish I had known that. And so that was $100 gift certificate I took care of today. So, you know, sometimes it's, you know, I didn't have to. It was clear in the contract that curtains and drapes are the property of the seller. But when you have a client who's a little bit upset because, you know, something wasn't as they expected, sometimes you have to make it right. Sometimes you got to write the check. So, you know, considering this guy had bought and sold like 6 or 7 houses with me over 25 years. I thought it was probably a good investment. So,
Probably was.
yeah.
One of the things, I think one of the most important things we can do is when we write the contracts, explain them. Don't send them over by dot loop. And here, sign these. One of the practices that I teach in my training is I send documents over with view only. View only. And I put in there, see you at 3 o'clock, give me a call. We're going to review whenever we're going to meet. If we're doing it virtually, we're not going to be meeting where I can explain it. So I send them over in view only. And this is what I teach agents to do. Then after we get on Zoom or a phone call and I review those topics, the contracts with them, then I resend them over where they can sign. And that's a really good practice. And then secondly, expectations. By reviewing the contract, we aren't going to miss some of these highlights. And it's easy to do. And the other thing is when there's all the personal property attached and then there's the reserved items, I always clarify hot tubs, certain things that we just know we have issues over, docks. You want to, if I see reserved refrigerator in the listing agreement or MLS, I put reserved. We understand you're taking your refrigerator. I think the clearer we get in our contracts, the better our business will be, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that one of the questions we get is when a buyer takes possession of the property, they go in and they say, but wait, the dishwasher doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it worked on the seller's disclosure form, or that it was going to be included on the seller's disclosure form. And my answer to that is the seller's disclosure form is not a contract. It is exactly
Right.
as it says it is. It is a disclosure about what the condition is to the best of the seller's knowledge. However, some agents believe that if something is listed on the seller's disclosure, it is automatically included with the sale of the property. It is not. You still have to include it on the purchase agreement if it's personal property. And if it's supposedly in working order, then you probably should have inspections to make sure that it continues to be in working order.
Right.
So,
right.
Do we have any questions out there? We've covered a lot of ground here today, and I just want to make sure that any questions agents might have, we can answer right now, or feel free to answer that or post them here, and we'll answer them throughout the day as you post them. So, any questions as we wrap up? Let's see if we have anybody. Just give it a moment, if we will, and see what happens. Any other thoughts, Kim, before we leave?
No, I just wanted to say again, we never advise having your client ever move in prior to closing. It's just,
yeah, absolutely. Great.
absolutely
Great
not.
point.
We
Yeah.
get questions about, well, what if they get in there and they go, oh, I don't really like this home, or they can't get their financing, or, anything could cause them, to change their mind. Now they're in there, now they're a tenant. It's one thing to put something in the garage. We don't like that, but absolutely do not allow your client to move in prior to closing. Find another way, pay for a hotel, whatever you have to do. I have one question for you, just to be clear. Say I did my walkthrough. I saw a red flag that, hey, you got a lot of stuff still in the house, and we get the keys in 24 hours. And the listing agent says, yep, they have a truck coming in the morning, they'll be out. You get your keys in 24 hours, you go there, and the seller's still there, and they go, we're not out yet. What does an agent do?
Well, that's a really good question, because ultimately, it's a civil matter. It's a matter of a contract. I've had some agents, believe that they can call the police and have the seller removed. That's not going to happen. So, if the police show up, they're going to say this is a civil matter. We're not going to touch this. And then you get into the question of tenancy and sufferance. Was there anything in the contract which said that if they overstay the period of time indicated in the purchase agreement, there is a penalty of tenancy and sufferance in some amount? I know that a lot of agents don't even put that in there.
Right.
And it's got to be a little painful Because if tenancy and sufferance is $100 a day, well, I could go rent, it's cheaper than renting a hotel room. So why wouldn't I stay there? But if it's $200 or $300 or $400 a day, now it gets a little ugly. And now if they say they're 3 or 4 days, for example, they could be looking at a $2,000, $3,000 bill if you've provided enough information or enough penalty in that tenancy and sufferance paragraph. So I recommend that they include that first of all, and then act upon it if they are faced with a seller who doesn't want to get out. If they're saying, well, I just haven't gotten everything moved. We've had situations where agents have actually gone over there themselves and hired a rental truck and some manpower and gone over there and helped people get out of their property because they are either incapable or unwilling to do it themselves. So
Right. Yeah, good stuff. And that $400 a day adds up fast. What if you need a hotel? Your pets need to be boarded somewhere. You have a moving truck that you've rented. I don't put anything less than $400 a day. And then we still have to keep those expenses if they aren't out, take them to small claims court, but hopefully you would win. So these are all really good topics. I will post this little cheat sheet on possession language, and it lists where those forms are. And, just remember, do good business up front and it'll avoid a lot of problems later.
absolutely. Thanks, Kim. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And we will see you next week. Thanks for joining Deal Local Livestream. Watch for those posts by Kim. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to put them on there on Facebook Connect, and we'll answer them as we can. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks. See you, Don. Bye.